In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.
Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
The challenge of affordable housing in Memphis, tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes with the Daily Memphian. Thanks for joining us. Before we get started with our guest tonight, I will note that obviously there was an election this week, which we've covered extensively in Daily Memphian. I'll continue as things happen on that front. We'll be reaching out to the now Democratic and Republican candidates for county mayor and to the candidates for sheriff and try to get them on in the coming weeks. We'll also go deeper into changes at county commission and county clerk, other things that are going on, the outcomes of the election as we move towards the general and then beyond. Also, there was probably, as we record this Thursday morning, sometime Thursday, a vote on redistricting at the state legislature. We've been covering that at the Daily Memphian, Bill, and others. And you can keep up with that there. We'll be digging into that as a show or shows probably in coming weeks and months. And, of course, not to be forgotten that the state is taking over Memphis Shelby County Schools. So a new board will be proposed and appointed in coming weeks. We'll be digging into that on the show and in Daily Memphian. And WKNO FM has news updates on those as well. But I am very pleased to have a group here talking about affordable housing in Memphis. Let me start by introducing Zach Amos, Director of Public Policy for Habitat for Humanity of Greater Memphis. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Kelbert Fagan is Program Manager for Convergence Memphis. Thank you for being here. And Ron Brooks is President of River City Capital. Thank you for being here.
Yep, thanks, Eric.
Along with Bill Dries, reporter with the Daily Memphian. I think I'll start, and maybe we'll just do it in the same order I just introduced you all. I'll give you, 30 seconds a minute just to talk about what your organization does, and then we'll go deeper into that. But just some people are familiar with, or maybe in some ways, like with Habitat, and we're going to start with Habitat, they're familiar with some of what Habitat does. But in the affordable housing space, give us the snapshot of what Habitat does in Memphis.
So Habitat for Humanity of Greater Memphis has been around for about 43 years now. We've built almost 650 homes in the greater Memphis area. We are an affordable home ownership organization. We make our homes affordable by offering a 0% interest mortgage to our home buyers. We serve folks who are at 80% area median income or lower. That's our main program. Our secondary program is our Aging in Place program that we've done since about 2015, where we provide at no cost critical home repairs to low-income seniors throughout the city of Memphis.
Okay, and we'll dig into more of what you do, but thank you. And I'll go to you, Kelbert. Talk about what Convergence Memphis does.
Convergence Memphis was founded by the Mortgage Bankers Association and THDA to increase home ownership amongst low to moderate income minorities in the black community here in Memphis. We work as a subsidiary of United Housing. So we basically converge with all the housing professionals interested in the mission. We focus both on the inventory side and the demand side, helping the consumer and the emerging developer with partnerships around Memphis.
Okay, and River City Capital does what?
Yeah, so Eric, River City Capital is a subsidiary of Community Lift, and we are what's referred to as a Community Development Financial Institution, or a CDFI. And so we come in on the capital side, and we work with many of our bank partners and foundations. We've existed since 2010, and we support largely small business owners, so you think about the entire ecosystem, and then emerging developers as well with Capital Stack.
All right, let me bring in Bill and we'll dig into all this.
So, Kelbert, talk about emerging developers. What kind of a pool is there in the city presently?
Well, I think in Memphis in particular, there's definitely a strong desire for emerging developers. With organizations like CRA, local CRA, the Developers Academy, which is done by the Alliance for Housing Progress. There's a lot of support for them. Mm-hmm. We find that through our land expo that we put on, we have typically over 200 people that come to that event, where we offer the opportunity for them to know about the projects to develop land here in Memphis has been pretty successful. And it also shows the demand for emerging developers to have projects. They're very interested in that. And through that, they may find out about programs like the Essential Housing Program through the CRA, where they get an opportunity to have lots made available for them if they can meet the criteria. And if they do, then we offer a $10,000 forgivable loan grant to them.
Right.
Give them an opportunity to take care of the pre-development costs, because that's kind of a barrier for emerging developers, and they can get started, and it helps put a dent in our lack of affordable inventory here in Memphis.
Right. And are you talking to developers for homes to own and rental properties as well?
Yes.
Okay.
It's typically developers are either interested in building a single-family home to sell to an end user, or they are interested in building a multi-family home for rent up to a fourplex.
Right, right. Talk a little bit about multifamily, because when some folks hear multifamily historically in Memphis, they automatically think of a large apartment complex, kind of 60s or 70s style. That's not what's happening with multifamily. Right, Ron?
Right, that's correct. So what you typically see in multifamily is everything above, say, the duplex, right? So above 4 units is where you typically start their bill. And so what we see is, as Kelbert mentioned, there's a huge demand for developers to develop in some of those smaller, even unit spaces where they can acquire land, acquire it affordable. And where we tend to come in on the capital side in that community development is, how do we inject capital into those pro formas and those balance sheets to really help a project be able to, really take off.
What does capital look like for the city's push for affordable housing? Because the guys with the capital, they want to see this pencil out, so to speak.
Right. Yeah. So it looks at a myriad of different ways, and it comes in different forms, right? So you think of that capital stack, you're thinking of some sort of anchor, right? So that could be a bank, that could be a foundation, could be a CDFI like us, build that comes in. And then when you think about, on the demand side, as Kelbert mentioned, there's a huge push for, aligning sort of custom tailored, products in the lending side for those borrowers. So things around, how can you assess risk, right? And how can you assess credit without some of the traditional sort of frameworks that have existed? So, yeah.
Zach, Habitat works exclusively home ownership, right?
That's right.
How does the mix of rental with single-family home ownership, what's that mix like from your perspective?
Well, it may be counterintuitive, but we as Habitat, we really care about the affordable rental market because those are people that we eventually want to see as potential clients and homeowners. I think one thing that we see a lot in home ownership spaces is that when people do not have affordable rental, they can't save up for a down payment for their first home. And that is really the biggest barrier for individuals to buy a home today. It's that first initial down payment. The median rent in Memphis is about, I think, $1,200 a month. And, that is going to be really expensive for a lot of folks in our community. When you're wanting to have affordable housing, the benchmark is you want somebody to spend less than 30% of their take-home pay on those housing costs. That's not necessarily just rent. That's also utilities. That's also home insurance. It's all of it bundled into one. And so with our affordable homeownership program, our 0% interest mortgage helps save people a lot of money on that monthly payment. Our average monthly payment for a mortgage is about $850. And that is, again, for home ownership. So affordable rental is absolutely crucial in the spectrum of affordable housing. And we need investment at all levels in order to make a better community for Memphians. 40
years is a long time to be in the business of building homes, whether they're rental or home ownership. How has Habitat seen the Memphis market change in that regard?
Well, I think there's kind of a before and after story after 2008. Before 2008, the home ownership rate in the city of Memphis was about 71%. But nowadays, it's closer to 48%, right? So it has gone down significantly. There's also a pretty significant split between white home ownership rate and black home ownership rate in the city of Memphis, which is not necessarily surprising, right, in terms of economic differences throughout our city, which is unfortunate. We have built, again, like I said, 650 homes in this time. We've also, in the past 10 years, have built 200 homes just in Uptown Memphis. And I think what we have seen is there are a lot of communities in Memphis where, as you were mentioning earlier, the deals don't necessarily pencil out. There exists what we call an appraisal gap, where the cost to build actually is higher than what the ultimate appraisal comes in at. So, for example, if it costs us $200,000 to build a home and the appraisal comes in at $170,000, that's why something doesn't get built. We're able to eat it a little bit as a nonprofit, but in that Uptown community, for these past 10 years, we had seen appraisal gaps on every single home that we had built until February. On February, we got our first 2 appraisals that met the cost to build, which I think is an example of when there is dedicated investment into a community, it is worth it. We made a bet that Uptown was a place that should be invested in. 10 years later, we were right. And so I think that is an example of it takes dedicated investment and dedicated effort to turn around a lot of communities.
Let me go to you, Kelbert. The challenge, I mean, there's challenges building housing all across the country at virtually every level, right? I mean, they're just, I mean, even coming off, we mentioned 2008 and the financial crisis. I mean, lending standards changed. They tightened dramatically. Some would say they overcorrected from the kind of loose subprime, I don't know if that's true, but that's been an argument that's been made. A lot of people got out of the business, the trades, or they went into other types of development and just said, no, we're not going to deal with housing. Interest rates, all that happened even before the last, COVID, and you've got inflation and the cost of building materials and labor going up, and land costs going up. Mm-hmm. How do you, with all those impediments across the board, right? And then you add in affordable housing and some of the challenges y'all are talking about.
Yeah.
How do you get past all those hurdles to make this happen?
Yeah, I think one of the key things with Convergence is we believe that it's going to take every institution to come together to create a solution. That's why we believe in partnering with River City, Habitat for Humanity, like I mentioned, local CRA, the Community Redevelopment Agency, the local Development Academy that's held by Alliance Progressive Housing. Like, we believe that these organizations together have a solution. Some have pre-development funds, some have low-cost loans. There's training there. There's opportunity for land if you bring in Memphis City government and their housing department. So when you get everybody in the room with all the resources for let's say the emerging developer, then I think you increase your chances of overcoming some of the challenges.
I don't know if we said this out loud, but part of the backdrop of this is Mayor Paul Young, City of Memphis, announced a goal some months ago of 10,000 new or renovated homes by 2030. I can't remember. I've heard different numbers about the overall need for affordable housing units, but it's 39,000. So, I mean, we probably should have said that sooner. The scale of it is super challenging. One thing I'll ask you is, all these challenges aside, are there investors, lenders who make money on affordable housing, or is it all a form of philanthropy?
Yeah, there's a form, Eric, of some level of sort of philanthropy and support that comes into play. It goes back to some of what Zach mentioned, which is some of the gap between the appraisal values and cost to build and things of that nature. So what we're seeing in affordable spaces is, from the lender perspective, is there is some sort of injection in some form. Now, they could vary in different forms and flavors and things of that nature. But I think one of the big pieces that we see, Eric, is, and just to sort of piggyback on something that Zach mentioned quickly, is, defining really what is affordable to begin with, right? And he used sort of the formula that we use, and that's just where, like Kelbert mentioned, when you talk about collaborating, is we have to get aligned on sort of speaking the same language, which is the aligning cost and sort of that development piece with the capital, right? And sometimes there's a gulf in that, as you mentioned, coming now. So we look at underwriting the same way. Is the mortgage expense to, say, the household 30% or less, right? And so it's as we align more on sort of those pieces and we're speaking the same language, I think that helps with Kelbert's point in terms of collaboration.
Where do, one more for me, and I don't know who wants to take this, but where does, one big outcome of the, or byproduct of the financial crisis, the subprime crisis, all of that was corporate and hedge fund, big billion-dollar entities said, oh, wow, we can buy up houses all around the country for very, very cheap, ostensibly, hopefully fix them up and rent them. And that became a huge business that took tens of thousands nationally, if not hundreds of homes, both existing, renovated, and probably, I would assume, new, off the market for home ownership. In Memphis specifically, who wants to take this? Have the corporate ownership, the corporate rentals, have they been good, bad, or mixed?
Go ahead.
I would say, I think sometimes renting gets a bad rap, but it still works towards home ownership. You can say it's one of the first steps to becoming a homeowner. I think for us, as we do some of our home buyer expos, when we go out to the neighborhoods that are majority minority, I say about 80 to 85% of those folks are renters. So it's good for them to start somewhere, to have housing. And once they get the information they need to get about all the different products that are out there for them to become homeowners, there'll still be a house available for them despite what the corporate companies are doing.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
When it comes to corporate home ownership in Memphis, the rate is higher than it is nationally. How much is it? It kind of depends on who you ask. The city of Memphis does not have a rental registry, so we can't necessarily give you a precise number.
Which is worth pausing on and is kind of mind-blowing. There is not a database anywhere at the assessor's office, trustee's office, county, city. There is no sort of list of these homes are owned by these people and rented and are primarily rental units.
The best you can do is, and I will shout out Innovate Memphis here, their property hub. If you have a list of all of the corporate names, then you can filter by those names, but those names can change by the day.
But keep going. I interrupted you.
No, and the corporate landowners, I think it depends on if they are buying a distressed house. That entity is incentivized to renovate it, get it up to standard, get it into a place where it is livable. So that is a benefit.
And stabilizing of a neighborhood that might otherwise get blighted.
100%.
Right? That's part of the argument.
100%. But there is a very legitimate tension that people have that say, well, that's the American dream that's owned by somebody who's just looking at it on a spreadsheet, right? Like, this is supposed to be someone's life, someone's dream, and it's just a number to someone else. And so I think that tension is really palpable in many communities throughout Memphis.
Ron, you wanted to chime in?
Yeah, I think it's a huge tension point. What I would say, and sort of coming off the backs of Kelbert and Zach, is I would lean more on the side, Eric, that it's created, that sort of gulf that Zach mentioned, which is going from 71% sort of pre, sort of 08 to now 71%, or greater.
Yeah.
Oh, actually 50.
Yeah. Is that what you said? 50%?
About 48.
48. Okay, yeah. So 48% home ownership, but a large percentage of on the renter side, and I don't necessarily see the transition from that renter to ownership happen at scale. Right, and so then what happens is there's sort of this almost glass ceiling that gets created, right, where folks are not able to make that transition. And I know there's a lot of work being done in that space to help fill education gaps, and then also, in terms of gaps in lending product to be able to support. Yeah. But a lot of what I see with that, and we tend to think of like the large players, like the Black Rocks and things like that. But there are many of these, as Zach alluded to, these sort of corporate entities that are, in some cases international, that are maybe not the best fiduciaries in terms of standing up property and avoiding blight and things of that nature. And we particularly see that here in Memphis.
Yeah. Bill.
So, if the appraisals are going up, and you've seen some indication of that, does that change how investors look at it, Ron?
Yeah. Well, it certainly does, right? And Zach could certainly speak to this even better than I could in terms of that appraisal gap and what it does ultimately to performers and to the financials of a potential deal. right? And how, particularly in the traditional lending space, that creates a gap. And that's where, organizations like ours, Bill, in terms of at the Community Development Financial Institution, or CDFI, where we're able to come in and help fill those gaps. And as Kelbert mentioned earlier, the more we can sort of, come together as Avengers, right, and use our superpowers for good, to align in that space, I think that's where those gaps can get filled strategically and ensure that you have a long-term viability. Well,
Zach, is it a trend, or did you just get lucky on those two properties?
It's a trend based on communities throughout the city. If one area is going to be booming, that doesn't necessarily mean everywhere is. I think there are often some places where we build where, I know, Eric, you were mentioning land costs going up. There are some times where we buy a lot that's worth $1,000, right? And so when we are building a $200,000 structure on it, that means your appraisal's not going to be there. On average, in a healthy real estate market, 80% of a parcel's value is in the structure and 20% is in the land. And a lot of the communities that we build in, the structure that we build is 98% of the value of the entire parcel. Yeah. And so, but this happens over time, right? If there's not a lot of activity in a neighborhood, there aren't very many things to compare a new build to. And so that you're just comparing it to a recent sale of a much older home that's in a worse condition, and that can drag down appraisal values.
So, Kelbert, talk about the first builder or developer into an area like that. They're taking more of a risk than maybe what you hope comes later, right?
Yeah, typically it's definitely a risk if you're building a brand new home, because like Zach was saying, the comps don't work out normally. The house is going to cost more to build than the current houses that have sold maybe in the last 6 months. Again, that's why it's important to bring other agencies into play to help decrease the cost to that emerging developer. And once that takes place, then you can reset the comps, especially if you can build more than a few houses in that area. And once you reset the comps, you start creating a higher level of equity for the current homeowners in that area. And it also can deter crime, and there are stats behind that, things of that nature. So that really is how the emerging developer can benefit, bringing in other institutions, which is what we try to focus on, to help them overcome the costs, and then you can reset the value of the homes once you get enough new builds in the area.
So when someone who's a developer, maybe drives through this area or hears about it and drives through and sees construction going on, I don't imagine they just pick up the phone right then and say, I've got to build here, but they maybe start looking at it, right?
Right, yeah, absolutely. I think there's just a lot of resources out there that we're working to make people aware of through some of the events we do, so that when the emerging developer, he or she is driving through an area and they see a lot that they want to develop, they know they can call Ron at River City Capital, right? They can contact someone at the city's housing department to find out what kind of incentives they can get to help them purchase that lot or have their lot donated, and find the financing for them to build a home. So we really work in a space where we want them to know that, hey, it's possible for you to build something in this area that may have been disinvested in.
All right, Ron.
Yeah, I was going to add one thing, and when we think about holistically, Bill, and what Kelbert's saying, often what gets left out of affordable housing is the ancillary sort of community around it, right? So you think about the live, work, play sort of element, and as Kelbert mentioned about partnerships, really looking to build, as you develop housing, right? You're developing housing density. You have to be thinking about what are the businesses that are supported around it, right?
Is there a park near there? Something like that.
Absolutely, right. Where's the coffee shop? Where is and thinking about that not from a cookie cutter perspective, but what actually works and would be well received by the community that is there, sort of currently present, right? And what works culturally within an area.
And I think that's going to be really important as the city goes through the latest UDC refresh.
UDC.
The Unified Development Code. refresh. It's going to change some of the zoning throughout the city. I think that's going to be really important to not only get these sort of community-based amenities that you're talking about, but also create more variety in the types of housing that we can see throughout the city. Over 70% of the city of Memphis is single-family detached housing, which is pretty common for southeastern kind of Sunbelt cities, but it is very much out of the norm for most cities in the United States. So having more diversity in housing type is going to be really important throughout the city to create that more density. It's less of a strain on public services, and that it can provide more economic opportunity for businesses to come in and fill economic needs.
Just to frame this up, people in this space have talked about a need for 39,000, almost 40,000 new or renovated units of affordable housing, be they homes, single-family apartments. The mayor has put forward a plan to a goal of 10,000 new or renovated homes by 2030. You deal a lot on the financing side of this, which is, financing construction right now is hard at any level in affordable housing. How do you talk to investors and say, this is a smart thing, this is a place where you want to put your money?
Yeah, so it's really talking to the right investor at the right time, Eric, particularly on the impact side. So we're finding many investors are wanting to really engage in this space around affordable housing, and where they may not see quite the largest return like they may see on the venture side. They know that it's a absolute need, and so we look to really engage that, curate that, and provide them a vehicle in which they can do that with a trustworthy partner, and we fulfill that.
Let me bring in Bill Dries from the Daily Memphian.
Zach, Amos with Habitat for Humanity, an organization that's been working here for more than 40 years. Talk about the evolution you've seen, because 40 years ago, this mix of home ownership and rental, which you do home ownership, that was something that people were just saying, well, the market will do what it will do. How have things changed?
2008 changed. It changed a lot of things. The home ownership rate in Memphis before 2008 was about 71%. Now it's under 50. Memphis is officially a majority renter city. What we have seen in our experience is that obviously the cost of housing has gone up for everyone, and a big hurdle for folks to get into home ownership now is an affordable down payment. If people can't save money on rent right now, they can't save money to ultimately have a down payment to buy their home and to start their own version of the American dream. Mm-hmm. We've also seen a lot of innovation in the space and a lot of government action to make it a little bit easier on the regulatory side and on the permitting side to make it easier and faster to build.
Bring in Kelbert Fagan, Program Manager for Convergence Memphis. You're working in some of the financing space, but also in just getting people into what can, sometimes in some phases, construction development has been a kind of insular business. A clubbish in a certain way. In order to develop, you have to have already developed, right? And so you work with folks trying to get them over that hump. Talk about that.
Yeah, so when you bring together emerging developers, be it their season, just getting started, they make you aware of some of the barriers they need to overcome to get started. And for us, once they make us aware, that's when we get active and start reaching out to partners with those resources. And once those resources are provided, then we amplify the number of developers that can help us put a dent in our shortage of, let's say, 39,000, right? We feel like the more emerging developers that we can resource, the more folks that'll be out there to help us achieve that goal of increasing affordable inventory.
Maybe I'll turn to Zach from Habitat on this one. The land bank, Shelby County Land Bank, over the years that we've been covering affordable housing and all these things. I can remember 10, 15 years ago, people would say, well, the land bank's got these thousands of property that have been taken in tax delinquent properties, but they sit blighted for too long because of, in a lot of cases, it was state law that just said that it was really hard to turn that property around. How has that changed now in terms of those, again, properties that are just sitting there undeveloped? They've not been taxes. The county has taken them from the owner. Are they getting back into the pipeline faster?
I think the current administration with Mayor Paul Young and I think his title is the Chief Director of, or the Chief of Infrastructure and Investment in the city, or Infrastructure and Development, I think, John Zena, they have revived the Building Home program, which is essentially if you come to a governmental body with a plan that fits a particular lot, they will give it to you because they want that back on the tax rolls, back into action, the land being used at its highest and most productive use.
We can talk, there are so many more things I wanted to get to with schools and with MATA and all the other kind of factors that go into this, but we are out of time. We appreciate all of you being here very much. Thank you for being here, Bill. As I mentioned at the top of the show, obviously there's an election this week and there's likely a redistricting that was voted on Thursday as we're taping this. We'll be tackling those issues and digging into them in future shows, as well as the school takeover and, again, upcoming elections, the general and the national elections, the state elections. All that and more coming up in future shows. And meanwhile, we, of course, Bill and others at the Daily Memphian will be covering that stuff every day, every hour. We appreciate you joining us. If you missed any of the show today, you can go to WKNO.org, the Daily Memphian, YouTube to get the full video, or you can download the show as a podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks very much, and we'll see you next week.